Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second edition of Secret to the Ring with Raven. Thank you very much for joining us today. And the first edition, of course, focused on working as a babyface.
It did?
Yes, it did.
Oh, damn, I don't remember.
Today, we will talk about working as a heel.
Oh, is this the second one?
Yep, this is number two.
This is not going to be about working as a heel. Today is going to be about Starpower. The heel one will have to wait, because the Starpower thing's on my mind. I brought some visual aids here. All right. Starpower. Very important to have star power. Mil Mascaris. We'll probably afford most of your time. Look at his outfit. Mil Mascaris actually stands for the man of 1,000 masks, is it?
Something like that.
1,000,000 masks, 100 masks, a lot of masks. Give me a shot of that, camera dude. All right, that's enough of that. All right, Ric Flair, the robes, all the cool stuff. Look in the back. Some pictures of the Heartbreak Kid, Ultimate Warrior. Cool outfits. All right. Jushin Thunder Liger. These just happen to be the dolls handy. That's why I got a Mexican, a Japanese, and an American. All right. Anyway, the whole point is this: it doesn't matter how good you are in the ring, unless you're someone of a skill level of like a Benoit or somebody. Ultimately, without star power, the odds of you making it anywhere are so slim to none. It's practically astronomical. And I mean, I think the whole idea of anybody getting in this business is they want to get to the top of the heap. To use a cliche, which I hate cliches, but you want to get to, become, everybody wants to be world champion. I mean, at least, I don't know why you would get in this business unless you want to be world champion. I mean, maybe you're a realist and you realize, I don't have the skills, I don't have the size. When I got in, I was 220 pounds. I was 5'10" and 3/4 then.
Which was small at the time.
Right, well, yeah, I was going to say, then I was extremely small. Like now there's guys 150 pounds, but when I started, 220 was small. I mean, 220 was a cruiserweight. I mean, now 220 is actually a pretty good-sized guy. A cruiserweight now is anybody under 180. AJ Styles is 185. When I started, 220 was tiny. And actually, it's probably about 218. Now I'm like 6'1". I've actually grown since then somehow. I don't know why. But probably all the chiropractic. But I'm 6 foot to 6'1" now. I'm 247. A little too much in the midsection, which you can kind of get away with the longer you're in the business. But I don't, I don't recommend it, and I don't recommend it for myself. But my legs been bothering me, so I can't do cardio. That's a good excuse. Always use that. My legs been bothering me, so I can't do cardio. But anyway, my point being is this: when I started, 220 was tiny. WWF at the time, everybody was 285 and just gassed to the gills. And I never had a problem with doing gas. I mean, even on the gas, I could only get to 220. When I graduated high school, I was 160 after 2 years of lifting, which, if you think about it, AJ Styles graduated high school at 185. So AJ Styles was, the size he is now, was 25 pounds bigger than me when I started. So it took a lot of training just to get to, at that time, a really passable size. And 220, I mean, I was a cruiserweight. I mean, WWE wouldn't even think of hiring me. WCW put me in the cruiserweight division with Brian Pillman, who was probably the only guy, my size or less. So, I mean, so being a realist, you have to be a realist. But, I mean, everybody wants to be world champion. But, I mean, you have to be a realist thinking, well, I might have a shot, I might not. The whole point, though, is without star power, it really doesn't matter. What's that noise? Whatever. Doesn't bother me. Anyway, without star power, that's some guy with the weed whacker outside. Anyway, without star power, your odds of making it decrease astronomically. Because, all right, think about this. I talk to all these cruiserweights all the time, all these small guys, and I have nothing against smaller wrestlers. In fact, I like a lot of them. I think a lot of them got a lot of potential, like Daniels and AJ Styles. I think AJ's phenomenal. I mean, I think he lives up to his name. Oh, and just so to put this in perspective, Shawn Michaels was 6'1", probably 220. Everybody thinks he's a lot smaller than he is, but he isn't. And that was back in the day so he was stuck in a tag team. He was in the AWA when I broke in, and then went to New York. He was stuck in a tag team because he was too small. And finally, when the big steroid scandal hit in '92, and Brett was given the belt, then Shawn was given an opportunity. But so prior to '92, '93, '94, '95, actually I wasn't 92, '93, '94, '95. You got to be a certain size. So, which is all part of the star power package. You have to look the part. You have to fit the part. I mean, all right. I talked to all the cruiserweights, and they're all like, and all they do is work on their moves. And I'm like, you can do all the moves in the world. It doesn't mean you're going to get over. I mean, the people, it's like watching a movie where all there is a bunch of car crashes, wrecks, blah, 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 blah. It's entertaining, but when it's over, you can't really remember much about it because there was no plot, there was no story, there was nothing to hook your interest. The best stories are always when you have good storytelling and good characters. And without star power, you have no characters. I mean, when you watch TV, if a character isn't interesting, are you going to keep watching the show? No. I mean, maybe if the storyline is that fantastic, but if the characters they don't jump off the screen, if they're not larger than life. I mean, there's a reason why Clint Eastwood, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone make piles and piles of money because people come to see their movies. They'll come see them in a bad movie, because they have star power. You want to see them. Russell Crowe, star power. Orlando Bloom, no star power. There's a great example. Russell Crowe in Gladiator was believable on the part. He carried himself like a star. He made you believe that he was Maximus the General. Orlando Bloom in Kingdom of Heaven, which I haven't seen, I wanted to, I haven't got around to yet. I just have a hard time believing him as a kick-ass leader because he looks too boyish. He doesn't look like a tough guy. He doesn't carry himself like a tough guy. He doesn't have that star power to make me believe that he could do what you need him to do. And the box office receipts pretty much show that my review is accurate. I still want to see it and go for myself, but my point I'm trying to make here is you have to be a star to get people interested. You have to carry yourself. I mean, Roddy Piper was such a star. He carried himself in such a way and had such a distinctive promo and personality. Hulk Hogan, Junkyard Dog. There was a reason why Vince in '84, when he took over the business, was able to take over because he pretty much went to every territory and picked the biggest star out of each, or anybody with the most star power, and used them to be his launching pad. But without star power, I mean, how do you do it? And that's the reason why WCW for years was in second place because they didn't have the star power to match Vince. And then when Bischoff started buying the top stars, hey, he turned it around instantly. Then bad storytelling and the fact that he didn't elevate people when he needed to turn the business around, but that's an entirely different matter. Bischoff should still be credited with literally single-handedly almost turning the business around because the business was so far on its ass that it makes now look like one of the most prosperous periods ever. I mean, right now Raw's doing like a 3-4 maybe, something like that.
3-5.
3-5. Yeah. I remember when I was back in the WWF the first time as Johnny Polo. And that was 91, Gabe, 92?
Something like that.
Something like that. And I had the 5th highest rated Raw of all time. Me against X-Pac, and somehow he didn't make the match. I think he was hurt. So it was me and Marty Jannetty, but the rating was like a 3-2. It was the 5th highest rated Raw of all time. So the numbers, you got to see, so no matter how bad you think the business is now, it was so bad back then, unbelievable. And before Raw, it was even worse. So what happened was there was no stars in the business. All the stars had either gotten old, retired, or just were on their last legs, and there were no new stars to replace them. And so today's up-and-comers, there's no new stars to replace them, and that's part of the reason why the business is on his ass. 2 reasons. Bad storytelling and no stars. No characters to inhabit the storylines. The reason why ECW was so influential in the first place was because the characters were all iconic. Steve the Sandman. Shane Douglas, the consummate wrestler at the time. Sandman. Sabu, the homicidal, genocidal, suicidal maniac. The Public Enemy, these white black guys, wiggers, rappers. Mikey Whipwreck, this kid who was so terrified to get in the ring, but Cactus made him do it. I'll do it, bang, bang. Cactus Jack. There were so many interesting, unique characters. Later on, ECW, when they actually became more fiscally solvent, which means financially doing better, for those at home who are stupid, even though they did better monetarily and drew bigger houses, well, I don't know if they did better monetarily, but they drew bigger houses, they were no longer influential, and Paulie couldn't make it run anymore because he didn't have the characters to build around. It's not that he didn't have the talent, he didn't have the characters. Talent and characters are 2 different things. You can say all you want about Hacksaw Jim Duggan that he wasn't a good worker. Bullshit. The guy put asses in seats, and you can check his track record in Mid-South UWF. He put a lot of asses in seats, and I would much rather have a guy who puts asses in seats than the guy who can do a bunch of crazy moves. Just because someone is critically by the sheets of the internet, oh, this guy's phenomenal, doesn't mean anything because they're not taking into account whether like I'll give you the best example. When I was in ECW, Benoit and Guerrero, actually I'm sorry, it was Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko, who everybody raves as two great phenomenal workers, blah blah blah. I remember being at matches where the crowd booed him out of the building to the point where Dean Malenko would grab the mic and tell the people to shut the fuck up because, you know, it's fucking insulting. They're busting their ass, and he was right, but still the crowd didn't care. So it doesn't matter how good technically you are, if people don't care about it, doesn't make a fucking difference. And that's something the internet and the sheets don't get, and all these guys that keep getting put over, this guy's so good, this guy's so great, push him, push him. Well, you can't push him if they don't have the skills to carry it. You know, I love Jeff Hardy to death, and for years, push him, push him, push him. Except the point was, and all the sheets kept saying, and then they got the TNA and they pushed him, he goes, well, he doesn't care anymore. Well, I don't think it had anything to do with that. The guy can't cut promos. Nothing against him personally, I love Jeff, but he's not a promo man, Matt was. And without promos, how are you going to talk people into the seats? You know, you can only, there's going to be a few exceptions like Goldberg, of course, but for the most part, if you can't talk them into the seats, you have to be a character, you have to have star power, which includes microphone skills as well. Star power. Junkyard Dog wasn't much of a worker at all. He made Watts so much fucking money. I mean, it was scary how much money he made for Watts. You know, you could say, well, he couldn't work. Well, who gives a shit? Hulk Hogan. Hey, Flair was 1,000 times better worker than Hulk Hogan. But it doesn't matter. Hulk Hogan put more asses in seats. You know, now when you have a guy like Austin who can do both, that's the best of both worlds. Or like The Rock. But that's few and far between. And not to say that Flair didn't have star power, because he did. Flair was one of the most charismatic, star-powered individuals ever. Just Hogan was even bigger than he was. He's bigger than life. Physically, you know, Hogan was like 6'5", 6'6", but he came across like he was 6'10", like he was the baddest man on the planet. Taz. Paulie convinced the world that Taz was the single baddest man on the planet. I mean, if you put Taz in a shoot fight, he would have got annihilated. But it doesn't matter, because Paulie created this character who was larger than life, and people believed it. For the most part, there are a few components to star power, and some people don't need all the components. Some people are so good at one they don't need any of the others. And then so there's a whole bunch of variables. And not to say Jeff Hardy doesn't have star power, because he does. But star power without, if you're missing certain aspects of it, then it only goes so far as well. So there's a whole lot of variables, and to try and pin it down, which I will try, is a little more complicated than it seems. But the point I'm trying to make is this, is you can be the greatest ring technician ever, but if you can't put asses in seats, it doesn't matter, and the way you put asses in seats is you become a star. Back to my point that I keep jumping over myself. I talked to all these cruiserweights, and I'm like, who did you want to be when you got into wrestling? I wanted to be Shawn Michaels. 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 And all they do is they try and do all the moves he did. But that's not all Shawn was. Shawn could talk. Shawn had style. He had grace. He knew when to sell, when not to sell. And more than anything, he came across like a star. You believe that he was one of the biggest stars on the planet. He carried himself like a star. You know, his ring outfits, he had these great ring costumes. He had so much to the package that frankly, if all you saw was his ring work, then I don't know what the fuck you were looking at. And so when you want to emulate him, why are you just taking the ring work? And when you go to the ring and practice, like, you know, I talk to guys like Elix Skipper. I love Elix. And for the longest time, all he would do is work on new moves, work on new moves. I'm like, Elix, what's your character? I don't know. What would he say in a promo? I don't know. I go, well, Elix, he goes, well, it's prime time. I go, what does that mean? I don't know. I go, that's my whole point. I go, and Elix is a very good, I love Elix, a very good guy. But what I tried to explain to him, and now he's starting to get, is that you can learn all the moves, but if you don't know the rest of the package, the moves are inconsequential. So I said, instead of working on the moves anymore, why don't you spend all the time that you lay in bed at night thinking of moves, and all the time during the day when you're driving around going, oh, this would be a cool move, spend it working on your character. You know, and that's what most of these cruiserweights don't do, because they're like, they just want to be a worker. But a worker in the old days was just a good hand. He was a guy underneath that put over the stars. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be the guy who puts over the stars. I want to be the star, you know. So, I mean, it's a simple equation. Be a star or be the guy that makes the star. I don't know. I think being a star pays a lot more, and it's a lot more prestigious, and it's a lot more fun. One of the things I always say is, one of the most basic things you can do is get a ring jacket. Which actually, if you talk to any old ECW, it actually gets a laugh because I'm so strident about it that it actually became like a goofy locker room backstage catchphrase to mock me, but in good, but to mock me in fun because they understand it's an accurate point. But I was so argumentative about the point that it became preposterous. But if you just come to the ring in a pair of tights, I mean, how blasé and bland is that? You know, there are the exceptions to the rule. Like, I'll give you, for an example, Taz. Well, when Paulie made him, he didn't need it, but that also fit his character. Because his character was like a Mike Tyson type, bare bones minimalist. Same with Austin.
He also had the towel over his head.
He had the towel over his head, which actually added a whole lot, which was a very interesting thing that he added to it. Austin, he just had the vest, but he didn't need much either, because, once again, there are always exceptions to the rules. But the Warrior, as fucking rotten as he was in the ring, he drew money. He put asses in seats, and he made a shitload of money. I mean, enough money that he never had to work again. You know, he was a chiropractor. I don't think he's ever cracked the back since. You know, he was starving to death in Texas as a Dingo Warrior. Went to New York and made millions. I mean, and that was back when he made $1 million. He was making $1 million a year when the only person who ever made $1 million a year was Hogan before that. If that, I guess, right? Gabe?
Yeah.
I mean, but he had the jackets, he had the painted face, he had the tassels on the arm, which, you know, I mean, of course doesn't fly today, but, I mean, it was great. The Road Warriors, what presence they had. I mean, back in the day, that was so monumental ahead of its time, because they had the painted face before the Warrior did. The painted face, and everybody who painted their face later copied the Road Warriors. Sting, when they put Sting up in the rafters. I mean, Sting already was a charismatic individual. Then they put him up in the rafters and made him the Crow character, became even more charismatic. But do you think he would have been charismatic as the Crow if he just had a pair of trunks on and a pair of boots, knee pads, and just stood up in the rafters, no paint on his face, no jacket, no anything, and no baseball bat, no everything, you know, just guy in a pair of tights up in the balcony. You're like, what the fuck is that guy in a pair of tights up in the balcony? Oh, maybe he's going to jump. Maybe he's going to kill himself. That'd be interesting. Good suicide, wrestling. That out of suicide. Anyway, so I mean, you know, the first place to start is a ring jacket. I mean, when I got into business, I always wanted to wear a cape. Because I was like the Macho Man's cape. Say those really cool capes back in the day. And he had, what he had was like these metal things in him. They came out to his arm, so when he lifted it out, the whole cape came out. And that was the coolest look. And he had the bandana when nobody wore bandanas. Everybody and their mom, girls wore bandanas. But back when the Macho Man wore it, and he had, they weren't Oakleys, I don't think. What were the sunglasses he had before Oakleys?
I don't.
But they were like Oakley-like. But this is before anybody had those. They were like a couple $100 sunglasses, which now is normal. But back in '84 was, you know, nobody paid more than $10 for a pair of sunglasses. You know, nobody wore bandanas. Nobody had the capes. I mean, he had like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of outfits. And you have to make money. You have to spend money. Remind me about that. You have to spend money to make money. Because I keep jumping around, so I'll just remind you to remind me. Terry Taylor has this great robe that makes a semi-annual appearance on TNA. Whenever D'Amore has a match, he'll wear it. Or if Terry has something, he'll wear it. And I think Terry paid like $3,000 for it, and that was back in '79, '80. You know, it's expensive. Ric Flair's robe is a couple grand, $2-3 He probably had 10 of them at one point, I imagine. But when I got into business, a year and a half into the business, I spent 3 months in Memphis, 10 months in Florida, then I went to Portland. By the time I was 6 months, a year into Portland, 2 years in the business, I probably had 15 ring jackets. What I would do is I would take jean jackets, and I mean, of course you have to, you know, remember the times when I would take jean jackets, I would cut holes in them, and I would wash it so they would all fray. I'd get some neon fabric from the fabric store and have somebody sew it on in different patterns, buy some fringe at the fabric store, and I had like 15 outfits, you know, and I had matching neon trunks to go with it. I wanted to be a star. You got to look like a star. You know, and people took to me. I mean, literally, I was in the business a year and a half when I got my first call to go to WCW, which I turned down. It's a whole other story, but a year and a half into the business, and back then it took you 5 to 7 years to get a spot in a major company, to actually become a star. It took you 5 to 7 years of paying your dues before you even got a push. This is a year and a half, and WCW was calling me up to make a 6-figure income, guaranteed, when back then there were no guaranteed deals, and or they were just starting in some small capacity, and 6 figures prior to that. I mean, 5 years before, the Fabulous Ones were making, and they were the hottest act in the business, and they were probably making they might have made $100,000 a year, and probably 60 of it were in gimmicks. I mean, so to be called up for that kind of money that soon, I mean, if I was, and I mean, granted, at that point I was considered a good worker, but if I was just a good worker, they wouldn't have called me. It was because of my mic skills and my flamboyance and my character and the whole package, because I carried myself like a star, you know. Jerry Jarrett said something to me, to paraphrase him, basically, the whole point is that, I mean, let me think how to paraphrase is correct. The best star, basically to the point that usually the best stars, like that's who they are. So if the guy's a prick, he always tends to be probably a prick in real life. I mean, there's a lot of truth to the character. But Jerry Jarrett would much rather deal with the headache of the pain in the ass character if he's a star and he's going to draw money than some guy who's going to go along to get along and not make him a cent. The headache is worth it. Shawn Michaels was a huge headache for years, but it was worth it because he made money, because he made the company money. Let's think. So, ring jacket. So, like I said, I wanted to wear a cape, but the cape didn't really fit what I wanted to do. So I had like a robe. I started with a robe, and that didn't really fit. It was one of those old school robes, and that didn't really fit. So then I went to the jean things like I talked about. And then I went to the Raven character, and which is more who I was anyway. And even though he was a bare bones minimalist, he still had a whole character that he brought to it. He still had a whole star power. The leather jacket, the flannel shirt, the ripped jeans. He looked like the living, breathing embodiment of what he was trying to get across, of society's dysfunction. So you have to be a star to get people to notice. And if you don't, then you're just wasting your time and spinning your wheels. You're not wasting your time, but you're spinning your wheels. It's kind of like today, all these young guys are like, man, when's my turn? When am I going to get a push? I'm like, they go, that's how you guys, like, they think in the old days we just got a push. Like, okay, it's your turn, you get a push. Gabe, your turn, you get a push. Forget your name again? Rich, I always forget your name. Rich, it's your turn, you get a push. Raven, you get a push now. No, it didn't work that way. What happened was, you got over. And if you got over, they patted you on the ass and said, okay, try and run with it. What everybody now wants is they want you to grab you by the wrist and pull you. Okay, come on, it's your turn, your turn. No, you didn't get turns. You got yourself over. And how did you get yourself over? By being a star. And if you couldn't be a star, you weren't getting over and you were going to stay underneath. And there were tons of good workers back then that never got a chance because they just didn't have any star power. Who's going to pay to see it? So this business has so much more to it. It's funny because the way people are trained today, they're trained by guys who were never in the business. They're trained by guys who were never trained by stars themselves, or by people who were good workers, or people who were anywhere. So you have these guys who don't know anything teaching more people who don't know anything. So now you have the blind leading the stupid. It's like Ray Charles teaching Stevie Wonder how to read. I mean, it's preposterous. So one of the biggest things is, you can learn all the moves, but I'm getting repetitive, but I'm just trying to emphasize, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be a star. If Ric Flair didn't have the robes, and Ric Flair didn't have the mic skills, and Ric Flair didn't have the bleach blonde hair, and Ric Flair didn't have the strut and the woo and all that, just be another guy. If Shawn Michaels didn't have the ring jackets and the promo skills and the arrogance that was so overpowering that made you tune in to watch him, the work definitely helped, but if he was just a good worker, Marty Jannetty is what he would have become. No offense to Marty, because me and Marty are really good friends, but Marty never made the kind of money or had the star power that Shawn did. Marty was just as good a worker, but he didn't have the star power. So Shawn went to the skyrocketed, and Marty hung around here. It's a difference,
Maybe something about the gear too to add is, like, with Raven, like, without you even saying a word, everyone knew what the Raven character was, and like Ric Flair with the suit, you knew who Ric Flair was before you even said a word.
Exactly. It's how you present yourself. You can see what the character is already trying to get across, what he is trying to embody. Like, I loved when characters would come out, if they had a promo earlier in the show, they would come out in street clothes, and then later on for their match, they'd come out in their ring gear. And I try and tell guys this, and they're like, I don't feel like changing clothes. I'll just come out with my thing. And you're like, look, they're seeing you twice in a show. They should see you in two different things. Or like, I remember talking to Low Key one time, and he used to wear a ring jacket, and he stopped wearing it. I'm like, why aren't you wearing your ring jacket? He's like, well, I want to show off my body. I'm like, you don't think they're going to see it for the 15 minutes you're in the ring? So you don't think they're going to see it when you unveil it? So I don't know. So I mean, so everybody has their own opinion. But I remember Brian Clark, who was Wrath. So they came with that cool gimmick for Wrath, Mortis, and Vandenballs as the curator. What was he? The curator of Human Oddities.
Yeah.
What was it called? James Vandenberg, the curator of Human Oddities.
Wasn't it Callis? It's Callis who had that gimmick. Wasn't it?
I don't know. That was Callis, but I mean Vandenberg had something we got with Wrath and Mortis. Remember?
Yeah.
It was the curator. It was the curator of something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they came out, and Canyon would come out there and get the camera. So Canyon would make this big presentation like this. He'd stand out, and then Vandenberg would pull the cape off and pull the accessories off, and it was pretty cool. And Wrath hated that, which I don't know why. He just hated it. He wanted to be a wrestler, and which boring. He just wanted to be a boring wrestler, which I don't get, and I don't know why, but that's what he wanted to be. So he would come walk out, and he had that cool mask over his face and the cape, and as he'd walk to the ring, he would just pull the mask off, pull the cape off, and just drop it. I'm like, that's it? I mean, how dull is that? I mean, the reason they gave him these outfits is to make a presentation, and there's no presentation. You know, I remember back in the day at house shows, I would get 6 minutes just taking my robe off because I was a heel and the people hated me. So I would go to take my robe off and the people would start to boo and I'd put it back on. And the people would, and then I'd go to take it off again. Then they'd boo some more and I'd put it back on. And I'd go yell at this guy or that. And I would get 6. I mean, you could get an hour and a half if you want, but you've burned the people out. But I would get a lot of time and a lot of entertainment out of the people just by the simple task of just going to unrobe and not unrobe. I mean, Rick Rude would do it, you know, and he'd get tons of mileage out of it. You know, it's crowd interaction. Wrestling is crowd interaction. If you're not interacting with the crowd, then you're not doing your job. You know, if you're just going out there to do spots to entertain yourself, well then it's like masturbation. You know, this is like sex. You're doing it with the people. When you're just going out there just doing a bunch of spots just to get your spots, you're not listening to the crowd, you're not reacting to them reacting to you, then you're just masturbating. You know, if you watch acting, good acting, you know the guy doesn't just say his lines. He listens to what the other guy. If you talk to any major acting coach, they'll say acting's about reacting. So if we're in a scene, and me and Gabe are in a scene, and Gabe's talking to me, and Gabe's going, my dog died. I'm like, it's so sad. You know, whatever. But if I'm just like waiting for my spot so I can say my lines, I'm like, that's so sad. You're like, wait a minute, you weren't even paying attention. You know, and that's what this is. When you're not listening to the crowd, you're not paying attention. They're reacting to you, and you're reacting to them reacting to you. You know, it's just like acting, you know. And so you have to incorporate, and that's all part of being a star, is incorporating all these facets in. You know, the Vandenberg, the Wrath thing, taking off his thing. I was going to say something else about that. Hold on, what else was I going to talk about?
Components of Starpower, spend money to make money.
Yeah, spend money. Well, yeah, but I want to get something else about the Wrath thing. I want to talk about, or somebody similar. Let me think if I can think of it. Like the Glacier thing. You know, once Glacier got in the ring, it kind of fizzled out, but yeah, cool entrance, you know what I mean? With the cool and the snow and the whole package. I mean, it's pretty interesting. I mean, which shows you can't just have a gimmick to get over. You have to have the whole package. But that's definitely a huge aspect. I mean, it was enough to get you interested in the first place. You know, if you don't carry the ball after it, well, that's a whole other matter. But, you know, it's not necessarily ring work that carries it. Because, you know, look at the Junkyard Dog. I mean, you know, if you just all you remember is the Junkyard Dog from the end of his WWE days, and you're not watching him, get some Mid-South or UWF stuff. When he was ruling the roost, I mean, he was so charismatic. He came out with the dog chain, he'd get on all fours, start barking. I mean, he was a character, and it wasn't his work rate that got him over. It was his presence, but his relationship with the fans. That's why Dusty was so over, because he was one of them, a Sandman. You have to have a relationship with the fans. If you know, like I said, it's just like, you know, doing high spots to do high spots. There is no relationship with the fans. The fans want to be inter-emotionally tied to you. They want to feel a part of the show. So, you know, there's no other sport. I mean, you go to golf, you know, the guy misses the putt on the 18th hole, he doesn't go, yes, I won, and the crowd goes, boo! It doesn't happen that way. You know, in baseball, if football, if the quarterback's getting ready to make a play and the crowd's making too much noise, he settles them down. He doesn't want the crowd to make noise. We want you to make noise. We want, we want the audience participation. I remember working one time, and there was this green kid, I won't say his name, and I think it was, I don't know where it was, but I was like, don't you listen to the crowd? He goes, no, I try not to. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? You know, I'll be in the corner during tag matches with some underneath, some not underneath, I guess underneath is a word, but with some independent guys, waiting for the hot tag, and the crowd will go. And they'll start getting and it's a double down, let's say. And let's say the crowd is loud as crap by 4. But the guy's waiting for a 9 count, so he doesn't come make the tag. The crowd dies out, and then he tags while they're flat. Because he's not listening to the crowd. By the same token, the crowd is making no noise at 5, and he crawls over and tags me. I'm like, why are you tagging me? There's no noise. Wait for the crowd. Let the people. We'll get the people. You have to have patience in them. You have to believe you'll get them. But without the crowd, it's just, you might as well do it in an empty arena. Which, contrary to popular belief, this legendary match between Lawler and Funk in an empty arena didn't do shit for business. Didn't draw a dime. You can ask Lawler and Funk, they'll both tell you, didn't draw a fucking dime. It's a legendary match now because of its uniqueness. It was interesting. It was cool to watch as a fan from a historical perspective, but at the time it didn't draw a fucking dime because there's no crowd. There's no crowd. And that's the hardest thing to teach is star power and listening to the crowd. What are you saying? What was some of the other stuff?
Spend money to make money.
I spend money to make money. All these guys are like, I'm not spending a dime. They don't pay me enough. Well, if you worked at fucking on Wall Street, you have to buy a bunch of business suits. If you worked as a fucking carpenter, you have to buy a bunch of tools. If you worked at well, you get the point. This is your job. You are your own investment. So you're investing in yourself. I knew if I spent money on my stuff, my outfits, my look, my costume, my whole character, I knew I'd make it back because I'm investing in me. And if I didn't think I was going to make it back, I'm in the wrong line of work. You have to invest in your product. If you buy a business, Gabe has Ring of Honor. If he didn't invest in Ring of Honor, how would he make any money? If he just goes, all right, I'm going to have a company, but I don't really feel like investing in a ring. So you guys, and I don't want to buy any chairs or stuff, or any cameras to film it. So you guys show up, somebody bring a camera to film it for me, and then I'll sell it and make a lot of money. And if there's a ring there, great. If there isn't there, it doesn't make any sense. So you are your own product. So if you're not investing in yourself, well then, I ain't spending any money. The company doesn't pay me that. Well, boo fucking who? Then then you're not going to go anywhere. Why should they invest in you if you're not willing to invest? If you're not willing to invest in yourself, why should they invest in you? If the company's going, look, this guy, we'd like to push this guy, but the guy won't, the guy doesn't even want to spend the effort himself, what the fuck? It's preposterous. You have to spend money. This is fun. You have to spend. I need some more. Can I get some more water too? Somebody. Yeah. You have to spend money. You have to spend money. Look, let's get a shot of Gabe. Gabe's got the Booker disease. He's getting a little belly. You have to spend money to make money. But and you shouldn't look at it as, crap, I got to spend a bunch of money. The whole thing is you're trying to invest in yourself. And you don't have to spend to be expensive. Back to the outfits I was talking about before, the jean stuff I bought. I'd go to TJ Maxx or Marshall's, buy a jean jacket for $35-$40. I'd buy a bunch of fabric, maybe $30 a jacket worth of fabric, so $65 a ring jacket. I had like 15 or 20 of them. I was making $500 a week plus pictures on the average. So I was probably making about $700, $800 a week, something like that, working in Portland, which is really good money back then, because all the other territories were dying out except for Memphis and Puerto Rico, and Memphis wasn't paying anywhere near that, and because Don Owens was paying $50 a night, and then in Portland on the house show TV, we would make. The top guys are making like $250, $300, so working 6 nights a week, 50 times 6 is $300, $250, $550, and then whatever I sold to selling gimmicks. Thanks, Gabe. But still, I mean, you gotta spend your money. I know it costs a lot to make a living, but I guess maybe you have to subsidize and get a stripper to take care of you. That's what the boys did in the old days. They would subsidize. That's what I'm gonna call it from now on.
Well, you can eBay everything now, anyways.
Yeah, you can eBay everything. So you buy a bunch of ring jackets, and once you're done with them, you fucking eBay them and sell them, and you make all your money back. So quit fucking crying. Quit being fucking little bunch of baby cunts. You have to spend money to make money. It's a business. It is a fucking business. I don't know what part they don't get about that.
Do you think you got to go on the gas to really have star power?
Not anymore, no. But you did. I mean, you did back in the day because you couldn't get around not having size. Back then, you had to be at least. I mean, like I said, I was 220. I was one of the smallest guys. Pillman was probably was 205, but he was shredded. So he was a little smaller. No, and also back then, dieting wasn't easy like it is now. I mean, back then, you couldn't get a grilled chicken sandwich at the drive-thru. Back then, there were no grilled chicken sandwiches. Back then, there was no dieting. There wasn't the capability to diet. There wasn't any. Metrics wasn't even invented. Protein shakes and metrics wasn't even invented. Well, I mean, they had the old school protein shakes, but the meal replacement metrics came around when I was in New York, or WCW. So it was like 93 probably. Before that, you couldn't just get a meal replacement shake to just drink it. They didn't have that, And the protein shakes were just big, clumpy, old school, it didn't mix up, didn't have any flavor. I mean, the difference between dieting then and dieting now is so astronomical that now you can diet. Plus, also back then, you were on the road every single day. You worked 6 nights a week, and when you traveled, you would drive everywhere. Like if you worked for Watts, you didn't have time to go to the gym because you had 400 or 500 mile drive one way. A lot of territories you did have time to train. But my point being is, you didn't have time to train. Doing an hour of cardio, that's a whole other matter. But now it's so much easier to diet. So you don't need to be on the gas now. You just have to look good. It's much easier to take the gas as a shortcut. And I have no problem with that. You know what I mean? And to be honest, steroids really, like any other thing, they're safe in moderation. Lyle Alzado did not die from steroids. What he died from was Jacobs-Creutzfeldt disease, which is what he got from taking growth hormone, not synthetic, but human growth hormone. Not synthetic human growth hormone, but actual human growth hormone from a cadaver. And the person who had it must say the person he got it from, because what they would do is they would harvest cadavers and they would get growth hormone from them. And unfortunately, if somebody had a disease like Jacobs-Creutzfeldt, you would get that; it would be passed on. But you can't get that from synthetic growth hormone. But the brain tumor or whatever the hell, brain cancer, you can't get that from steroids. It's just not a side effect. And actually, the main reason people have strokes from steroids is because their blood becomes too thick. It's called high hematocrit, and it becomes too thick. And if you get if you go to a doctor, get your blood work, they'll see you have high hematocrit, and you just go to the oncology center, and they'll phlebotomize you. They'll give you the phlebotomy where they just drain a liter of blood, which actually you could try doing by gigging yourself, but a liter is a lot of blood, because I've actually had to do it before. And a liter of blood, I was like, well, I'll just gig myself, and I'd gaff myself pretty deep, but a liter of blood, that's a fucking assload of fucking blood. So I don't think steroids are necessary, not anymore. Plus you can be 145 now if you're athletic enough. Rey Mysterio, as athletic as he is, he's nowhere near the athlete he was 7-8 years ago because his knees are shot, but he's so charismatic he doesn't need to be. If he was just that good an athlete, that would only carry him so far, but at a $135 or $145, whatever he is, he needs to be charismatic as well, and he is. He more than is. Do you know what I mean? Eddie Guerrero didn't become a true star until he became charismatic on his own. Because Eddie was teamed with Art Barr, and they were love machines, and Art was the character of the team. Art was he was the charisma, he was the entertainment, and Eddie was, and a phenomenal worker, and Eddie was just the worker as well. Eddie in ECW was just another worker, just another good worker. It wasn't until they put him in, when did he start blossoming, WCW or WWE?
No, it was WCW, towards the end of WCW.
Did end WCW, and WWE when he started Latino Heat and the whole thing, and he became a character. He became bigger than life, and then coupled that with his work rate, unbelievable, just so unbelievably talented. But prior to that, if you watch old ECW footage, he wasn't a star. He was a very, very talented worker, but he wasn't a star yet. He became a star, became a huge megastar, but he wasn't a star at that point. Neither was Benoit. Benoit didn't have that star power back then, and which is a reason why, and because he was small back then, That was the reason he wasn't pushed back then. In Japan, that's why they went to Japan, because that's where they could get work, because it was more about work rate than it was about star power. Or at least that's what they claim, but it really wasn't on top.
Yeah, well, we're discussing Benoit and Guerrero. Something about them is that, which this is what I'm bringing up for you to discuss next, is they didn't really have any presence back then either.
No.
And then they grew into presence. How do you get presence? I know it's something that you talked about. I know, like Christopher Daniels, for instance, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he's starting to grow into it finally.
Yeah. What do you mean by presence, and how do you get it?
Well, actually, I was watching this thing on Steve McQueen the other day, and Steve McQueen's a famous actor. For those who don't know who Steve McQueen is, in fact, he was one of the original really cool actors Who was legitimately like a cool guy in real life, and it carried over. And he was an ex-Marine. He was, but he was, busted. He was demoted like 7 times, so he was really rebellious. He rode motorcycles. Which back then, in Hollywood, like most of the stars back then weren't that, A lot of them weren't really the cool guys they played on TV. That was just an act. You know what I mean? But he legitimately was a legitimate, genuinely cool individual. And so I'm watching this documentary last week, and it's actually called The Essence of Cool, the Steve McQueen story or something like that. The Essence of Cool. And he carried it over. But what I was reading about it, one of the things that grabbed me the most is that he knew how to steal a scene. Like, they're talking about a scene in The Magnificent Seven, which was this hugely successful movie at the time, critically and commercially successful. About 7 Western guys, which I never actually seen it. I got it on my TiVo. And about 7 cowboys back in the day that go to do some kind of mission or some kind of crap like that. And he was, even though he started to become a star, and he was a leading man on some movies, he was second, but he was number 2 babyface behind Yul Brynner, and who was the original bald guy. And that was bald before bald was cool. And so he was the number 2 babyface. And what he did was he literally steals the movie, and they're actually talking about this in the documentary. And it was like every time there was a scene with him and Yul Brynner, he made sure that you watched him instead of Yul Brynner without taking anything away from Yul Brynner. Because there's a way to steal a scene, like when Yul Brynner, like there's a scene with just him and Yul Brynner riding the stagecoach. But he has all these little mannerisms and quirks and little things, like he's playing with his hat, or he's checking his watch, or I don't think they had watches back then, but whatever. So all these little things where you can't take your eyes off him, even though he's not doing anything. And there's a way to do that. And I tell guys like Daniels that there's a way to steal the scene without taking away, because you can't take away from the other guy, because then you're stepping on him, and that's unfair. And I don't believe in that. But there's a way to steal a scene. It's like when I'm being a heel, I want you to watch me get beat up, not watch the guy beating me up. And there is a distinction between the two, even though it sounds like the same thing, but it isn't. I remember watching a match where this really stuck out to me. It was Lawler versus Funk, and I was in Global, and I think I was commentating. I think that's why I was out there. And so Lawler was a babyface, and Lawler is one of the greatest workers of all time. I mean, Lawler will steal any scene he's in. If you put him in anything, you can't take your eyes off him. And I watched Funk come down, and Funk spent 20 minutes just getting into the ring. By the time he screwed with the fans and fucked around and took his fucking whatever that thing is, the serape off, and his whip, and his branding, or not his whip, his branding iron, and his hat, and fuck with people, and fuck with the commentators, and fuck with Lawler, and tried to get in the ring, and this and that, and did all this production. And I'm thinking, fuck, Lawler's got his thumb up his ass. I mean, Lawler literally was just standing there like this. He had nothing to do. And Funk wasn't fucking him, because Funk's job as a heel was to get over and get the people pissed, and that's what he was doing. There was nothing Lawler could do, and there was nothing wrong with him doing it, because he wasn't fucking Lawler, but you couldn't take your eyes off Funk. And I never, you couldn't take your eyes off him, and I just thought, whatever Lawler's doing, I glanced in the ring, and Lawler's doing nothing, because he couldn't do anything. There's nothing for him to do. And that's how you steal the scene, and that's an art form that comes with learning how to work, not how to have technical matches, but how to work, and how to interact with fans, and how to position yourself. And part of being a star. I mean, if you just go out there, you just walk to the ring, and they go, Joe Blow, and you raise your arm and you put it down, well, it's kind of it's not very exciting. If you come out there and you do a little kung fu motion, that's a little more interesting, and you build on that. I mean, and you build up ticks and quirks and little idiosyncrasies, like Lisa Kudrow as Phoebe. She had all these little quirks and idiosyncrasies that made her interesting as a character to watch. And now she's doing another show, and it's a little weird because she's doing some of the same stuff as a different character. So, some of it works, some of it doesn't, because a lot of it's just identifiable with Phoebe. And Steve McQueen was like that. He stole every scene he was in, and so and he actually it got to the point, I guess, where he didn't even want a lot of dialogue in his movies. Didn't need it, because he knew he could steal the scene without even having any dialogue. without having much dialogue. Clint Eastwood, he never said much, but what he said, and he carried himself, and he said it in such a way that he didn't need a whole lot of dialogue. He conveyed what he was trying to convey with such a charismatic tone and such star power that you're mesmerized where you can't take your eyes off him whether he's talking or not. So it makes De Niro such a great actor. When you're watching De Niro, if you're watching two people in a scene, De Niro, you can see him truly listening to what the person's saying and taking it in and reacting to it in such a way that you can't take your eyes off him even though somebody else is talking to him,
Well, is it more like a facial expression kind of thing? Or
it's hard to explain. That's one of it. It's facial expression. It's body language. It's the way you stand, the way you carry yourself, the way you react to it. What you wear and how you look. If you're supposed to be a slob and you look like a slob, if you're supposed to be a drunk fucking derelict, if your character's a drunk derelict and he's out there wearing a suit, you're like, I'll give you the best example. Back in the day, everybody had to wear suits back in the old days. Because they had to look professional, had to look like a star. Now I guess they're trying to reinstate that in New York, but back in the day, you had to look like a star. Except characters like Haystacks Calhoun, they wouldn't put him in a suit. You couldn't find a suit that would fit him because he was 600 pounds, which probably means he was 400. But besides that, because he was a hillbilly, what the fuck would a hillbilly be doing in a suit? And guys like that, if Watts ever caught you out of gimmick, you would get fired because you had to make the part believable. So if you're a barefoot hillbilly and all of a sudden you're driving around in a Jaguar, Watts would be like, you're out of my territory, or sell the fucking car because you're not conveying what needs to be conveyed. And back then, smaller territories, people believed it, which of course nobody did, but I'm sure a percentage did, but still, nevertheless, you get the point. So you have to look the part, you have to be the part. That's why Raven was so easy for me, because I just took it from my childhood. It wasn't like I had and that's why wrestlers aren't the greatest actors, and that's why we all play characters that are very close to ourselves, because it's much easier than trying to actually act. Because if we were actors, we'd probably if we were better actors, we'd probably go into acting. Although I don't think anybody could be as bad an actor as Anakin Skywalker. Hayden Christensen, he was more wooden than George Washington's teeth. That thing, he was rotten. Was he not the fucking most rotten fucking actor of all time?
I didn't watch Star Wars. So.
The second one, he was just atrocious. And so you figure now it's been 3 years, he'd have some acting lessons. He's just horrible. He's like this. I can't believe you. Line, please. He's like the guy in a poker commercial with a poker face. You just won $1 million. Your girlfriend just fucked a cat. I can't think of anything else funny. Look at Richard Lewis. Remember Richard Lewis, the comedian?
Yeah.
What a neurotic schlemiel he was. But his character, the way he carried himself, his mannerisms, he'd be like, and he'd run his fingers through his hair, and he'd be like, he'd walking around the stage stressing about everything. If he was just reading his material about how his life's a mess, and was just like, my life's a mess. It's not as interesting.
Everyone on Seinfeld's a good example of that, too.
Yeah, exactly. So, Kramer, you believed that Kramer was a complete idiot. He was a ridiculous goofus, a hipster doofus, as Elaine called him. Seinfeld, he was very meticulous. His house was perfectly neat. His clothes were always perfectly neat. And if it wasn't that way, it wouldn't make any sense. And so you have to carry yourself. The comedians especially, because they're alone with a microphone, so they have nothing but their presence. Like there's this The Amazing Jonathan. You ever seen him? He's like a comedian magician. He's out of his fucking mind, but his hair's sticking out everywhere. Or like Bobcat Goldthwait, his hair sticks out everywhere. Because but you have to convey the part. If you're not looking or acting or behaving, and then you have to do it in an over-the-top, larger-than-life way. It's much easier to be so far over the top they pull you back, as opposed to being here and they have to push you forward. And I guess a lot of it has to do with being self-conscious. Sharon's one of my closest friends in the business, and I thought he did his best stuff when he was wearing a skirt, because he put on the skirt like his Marilyn Manson thing with the what's that called?
The bustier.
Yeah, the bustier kind of thing or whatever, and he had different colored eyeballs and the whole 9 yards, and I guess at some point in his head, he's like, how can I be self-conscious? I'm wearing a goddamn dress. You know what I mean? And he stopped being self-conscious. And then when he went back to being just Sarin, he was more self-conscious, behind the microphone and stuff. And then they gave him a mop, and now he's like, well, how can I be self-conscious? I'm fucking talking to a mop, And so, if you're self-conscious and you're like, man, everybody's looking at me, well, you're in the wrong business. I mean, you want everyone to be looking at you. You want them to be staring at you. And if you're like, oh, fuck, that's why you have to commit. You have to commit to stuff. So make a note of that. I'll get back to that. You have to commit to it. But you can't be self-conscious. You can't feel inhibited. Like, to me, like, I come alive. You put me in front. I put me in front of a camera. I open up twice as much. Oh, we have a visitor. Oh, we have just a finger. Is that my food? Get my food, you bastard. Rich the cameraman leaving. Which, what are we going to do without him, being that the cameras are on tripods? Oh, good gosh, what will we do? But you have to commit to the character. You can't be self-conscious. You can't feel inhibited, because if you feel uncomfortable with all eyes on you, you can only go so far. I mean, look at McMahon's swagger to the ring. He's not self-conscious. He wants you to watch him. The Rock wants you to watch him. I want you to watch me. You know what I mean? That's why I'm in this business. I want the attention. The reason most people go into acting or any celebrity field is because they are insecure and they want attention. And then if you can't handle the attention once you get it, then you're in the wrong business. I mean, to be famous, there has to be something missing in, generally there's something missing in your own life that you need the adulation of perfect strangers, but if you can't handle the adulation, then you're in the wrong business. So you can't be self-conscious at all. You have to commit to the character. If your character is a moron, and I remember one time where I got so mad at Stevie Richards. I love Stevie. And I got so mad. Back then, we and him didn't get along at all. We got along, but we fought like cats and dogs. And I got so mad at him because he was supposed to do a joke about Big Dick Dudley, where he goes, "I love Big Dick." Now listen, what do you mean the rabbit died? Oh, we're back. Look at my phone, Gabe. All right, what are we talking about?
Big Dick Dudley, Stevie Richards.
Oh, right. So Stevie's character was supposed to be a bit of a nitwit, and so he's supposed to be like talking about how he loves Big Dick Dudley, but he's like, I love Big Dick. Except that he didn't want to be embarrassed by it because he was feeling really self-conscious, so he didn't want to say I love Big Dick, but he knew he had to, so he wanted to say it in such a way where everybody knew that he was in on the joke, which of course if he's in on the joke, that kind of ruins the joke. So he's like, I love Big Dick. Actually, wait, hold on, let me think. How did he say it? However he said it, he goes, I love Big Dick. And almost like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I know I'm in on the joke. And I'm like, you fucking jackass. You can't do it like that. You have to do it like, oh, I love Big Dick. Where you have no idea you're saying that you love Big Dick. That's why it's funny. If you know you're saying it, it's not funny anymore. And because he was so self-conscious, because he's already wearing, the fights I had with him trying to get him into the Daisy Dukes was ridiculous. Because Raven came out with these long jean shorts ripped up. So the Stevie character was the idea was his character was a big mark for mine. So he wanted to emulate me, and so I had the ripped up T-shirts, with the rock and roll bands, and but Stevie in his own nitwit style, not him personally, but his character, not Michael Manna, but Stevie Richards, the character. Well, he thought, well, Raven's wearing jean shorts, I'll wear jean shorts, but I want to look cool. In his mind, he's cool, so he wears Daisy Dukes, which look really gay on a guy. And then instead of wearing like a black concert shirt, like a long hanging, messy, fucked up one, he'd wear a half shirt and he'd cut it nice and high to show off his abs. And he'd wear like Warren, or some other gay band. You know what I mean? And so the whole point was his character didn't get the Raven character. He was a mark for it, and then he didn't quite get it on the same level that Raven got. He was trying to emulate it, but in his own nitwit fashion, he ended up looking like a jackass, which is what makes it entertaining. And I had to fight with him tooth and nail because he didn't want to look like a jackass. Nobody wants to look like a jackass. And I'm like, look, when I was Scotty the Body, when I went to Portland, first thing Piper made me do was he hired me, gave me 3 weeks to get over, which is how it should be done. If you can't get over in 3 weeks, then you don't really belong there. You didn't get hired and get a contract for a year or 6 months, or 90. That's another thing they don't get. Make me talk about that. Everybody thinks, now they, everybody gets contracts and hired for a length of time. I want to talk about that. So Piper goes, listen, and so he goes, I'm going to make you the first heel commentator we've had in Portland because I was a heel commentator in Florida with Gordon Soley, and because when we come on the air, I want you to pick your nose. You know, so I'm like, he goes, and then they'll call you Snotty the Body. It'll give you an instant recognition with the fans. You know, Scotty the Body, because I was calling myself Scotty the Body, so I'm picking my nose, they'll call me Snotty the Body, and it'll instantly get the fans to interact with me on a level that takes a lot longer normally to get there. You know, unless you find some way to get there faster. And I'm thinking, I don't want to do that, but you know, I'm not gonna say no, because back then you couldn't say no. Now people say, I'm not doing it. Well, we'll change it. Well, back then there was no changing it. If I would have said no, I never would have got the job. So I'm like, and on some level, I completely trusted Piper. I knew he knew what he was doing, but I didn't want to look stupid. You know what I mean? I was willing to look stupid in certain aspects, but I didn't want to look that fucking stupid. And then, but I did it anyway because I had to. And once I did it, that completely turned a switch in my head, and I got the business. You know what I mean? And so I would come on the air, and I'm like, oh, we're back. And then, you know, of course, for a rib, Piper goes, oh, we lost the footage, so the next week I had to pick my nose again. And by then I realized, you know what, this isn't bad at all. And what I ended up doing was I made these 8x10s of me picking my nose and talking to the other commentator, and then I would sell them at the matches, but I wouldn't let the fans know that I personally was selling them, so they would think that the baby faces were selling them, and they would all buy them. And then I would get to the ring, and I'd hold one of these up, and I'm like, all right, who's selling these? If any of you fans buy this picture, I'll leave, I'll never come back. So, of course, people would rush to the stands, they'd buy them, I would get all mad, I'd throw a fit, the baby faces would parade around the ring holding the picture, you know, me picking my nose, with my finger, you know, like, way up my nose, and I made a fortune off it, you know, because the people thought they were getting to me, and I'm like, schmucks, I'm getting to you, I'm selling the pictures, but they had no idea. So, you can't be self-conscious. I mean, you know, it's like, there's been a lot of shit-ass, crappy gimmicks. Like Johnny Polo. I didn't want to be Johnny Polo. Yeah, it's not me. I'm not a rich, upper crusty, you know, Connecticut kind of guy. I don't speak that way. So there's always going to be a disconnect, which Vince finally eventually realized, because I don't speak like a guy like that. I have my own particular vocal pattern, my own idiom, and it doesn't sound anything like a Connecticut guy. So no matter how much you dress me in the part, I'm never going to be the part. But I figured if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all out, and I came up with, I think, some pretty fucking hilarious shit. You know, because I figured Johnny Polo's a man of leisure. They wanted me to have a polo now, and I'm like, well, I could get really old quick, so then I started bringing different stuff. I remember one time I came out with scuba gear, and I came out with the big flippity flopper. You know, so of course I'm making an extra production trying to walk with them, you know, in a snorkel. And one time I came out with a lawn chair with a Hawaiian drink in it, but of course I had a giant drink this big, and I taped the umbrellas to it because I had to put some umbrellas in the drink. And I didn't know this at the time, but Nova told me that was that he was the jobber that fought Adam Bomb, and I dumped the Hawaiian drink on him. I'm pretty sure it was Nova. Anyway. But my whole point being is that, you know, so as a heel anyway, you're going to look stupid. And that's one of the hardest things to get baby faces is like, they don't want to look dumb. Well, be a heel then. And that's why everybody should have to be a heel first, so they understand that at some point they're going to lose, at some point they're going to look dumb, and then it's much easier to be a babyface, because otherwise, that's why babyfaces, generally, in real life, you'll find that the babyfaces are not nearly the nice people heels are, because heels are more content with themselves and willing to make an ass of themselves, and babyfaces are usually more prima donnas. And you'll find that in the business. At least that's the way it's been for years. Although now it's a lot different, because most of the guys aren't baby faces or heels. I mean, they may be considered a heel or a baby face, but they don't work like a heel. So you're not really a heel. But where I'm going with this is Vince McMahon, who's the billionaire, at the time was a billionaire, you know, one of the wealthiest men in the world at the time, owned the company, and he shoots an angle where Austin pulls a cap gun on him, it says bang, and he pisses himself on TV, which I don't think there's anything more humiliating than peeing your pants out of fear. And I'm like, well, look, the guy's a billionaire. He's willing to pee his pants out of fear. Really, how stupid, you know, if you're not willing to look stupid, and this guy's the billionaire owner who doesn't have to make himself look stupid at all, is willing to pee his pants out of fear, you're really going to have a hard time convincing me that your character wouldn't look stupid. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's going to look stupid. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us flawed human individuals. That's what makes us interesting. We all have the capacity to look stupid. And if you're going to be self-conscious, you're only going to go so far, because you're never going to get the people to relate to you on a larger-than-life level. What was the last thing I want to get back to? I said something about?
You said a bunch of components of Starpower. That was the one.
No, but I said, remind me of something when I was just making this Discord rant.
Committing to stuff.
No, just recently. I don't know. Let me think.
I didn't write anything down.
You
so.
suck. Gabe's the absent-minded professor. He doesn't even have know where the keys to the building are. He can write TV, he can produce TV, but ask him where the keys to the building are, he has no idea. His hair's growing like Albert Einstein, sticking up everywhere, like a mad genius. Yeah, you have to commit to it. You have to be willing to be the character. You have to be willing to look stupid. You have to be can't be self-conscious. You have to look like a star. You have to act like a star. You have to carry yourself like a star.
How about explaining that? Because a lot of guys don't know how to carry themselves.
Yeah, well, the minute you walk through the curtain, you are the character. You are a star. And if you walk through and you just walk out, you just walk to the ring, that's not really not very interesting. But if you walk out and you're, whatever it is your character does, whether it's he pumps the crowd up, or walks with intensity, or walks with a strut, or whatever he does, you're setting the tempo for the match. You're presenting a picture of what you want the people to see before you've ever set foot in the ring. The minute you come through the curtain, you're setting the tempo for who your character is. Jeff Hardy comes out, and he does his little running thing. He's got the paint on his face, and it's pretty cool looking. Who else? I'm trying to think. I don't watch much wrestling anymore. I love performing more than ever, but wrestling doesn't really seem to excite me anymore because there are no interesting storylines. I mean, not none, but there's very few interesting storylines and very few interesting characters. I haven't watched it in like 3 years. I mean, I love performing more than ever, but nothing's grabbed my attention. I mean, one of my favorite angles ever was when one of my favorite interesting segments was when Austin comes up on the Titantron while Rock's in the ring, and he's like, this is back when everybody had beepers before cell phones became cheap enough for everybody to have. And he goes, when you see your beeper go off 316, he goes, I'm going to kick your ass. And of course you think Austin's somewhere else because he's in the Titantron, and Rock's beeper goes off. He looks at his beeper, and his eyes bug out, and all of a sudden it says 316, and there's Austin fucking and just mauls the crap out of him. I mean, it entertained us so much that me, Canyon, Disco, Saturn, I don't know, like 5 or 6 of us, we would literally just beep one at somebody when like 5 of us would get together and beep like, Disco or Kidman, and then he'd look at his beeper, see 316, and the rest of us would go jump him and beat the crap out of him. It was an entertaining game. But if Rock wasn't the character he is, and he didn't sell it the way he did, where his eyes, oh my God, and he has that face, and if Austin doesn't, have that intensity that comes across where you believe that he's going to kick your ass, and then he would do this type of thing, like whereas if Lawler said it, you don't really believe that because that's not Lawler's character. Lawler's character wouldn't say, you see 316, I'm going to whoop your ass, you know what I mean? Just not something he would do. If you see, who else? I mean, it's not something Canyon would do. It's something that Austin would do. I mean, there's other characters that would do it, but you have to be who your character is. You have to understand your character. You have to know what your character would say. Like, I'm in a locker room sometimes, and I'll be working with Shane, and he's like, I don't think the franchise would do that. And some guys get pissed, like, I want a mark for his character. I like that. I want a guy to know what his character would do. Because if your character wouldn't, unless you're trying to protect them too much and just don't want to look stupid. But if you know what your character does, it's so much easier to work with you and to tell a story because you know the elements of it. Like if I go to these young guys today, I'm like, well, what's your character? I don't know. Like, that's pretty fascinating. That's exciting. I'm a guy who does high spots. Good. That'll get the people behind you. How are they going to get behind you? There's nothing to relate to. There's nothing to identify with. When you watch when you watch 24, the characters that stand out are like that Chloe chick. She's so persnickety and so fucking annoying. And everybody can relate to that because either they know somebody who's annoying, or they are annoying, or they have a friend who, you can relate to that character, but she does it in such a way. She carries herself in a way, she talks in a way, she makes the facials that go with it. You want to beat the piss out of her. But it's very identifiable and it's very easy to relate to and to get behind it. So she stands out. And that's why she steals every scene she's in. Jack Bauer steals, Kiefer Sutherland steals every scene because he just has this intensity that you believe that he's the baddest man on the planet. If you watch Alias, the father, who doesn't say anything, have very few words, but you're like, this is the baddest CIA, sneakiest motherfucker on the planet, because he carries himself in such a way, delivers his lines in such a way that you're like, oh yeah, I believe he does that. I believe he can kick some ass. And to be honest, he's not the most. When you actually put him in an action scene, he's not the best at it, but his acting is so good in every other way that you're like, oh, I can let that slide. Because he doesn't look like a tough guy when he actually gets into the actual action part of it. But that's so few and far between, because his character's more of a manipulator and pulling the strings, or he's getting beat up and he's taking the pain superhumanly. Like I remember there was a scene where Sloane, you ever watch Alias?
No.
Fucking tremendous. You gotta watch Alias. It's a fucking great show. Get the DVDs. But there's this character Sloane who's like the evil bastard. Well, not this season. He's a babyface now, but he's a heel for the first 2 seasons before he turned. And so he's the head of the heels, right? And he's such a ruthless, evil motherfucker. Kills people left and right just for crossing them. He's just an evil, ruthless motherfucker. And there's a scene where he's strapped to something and he can't escape for whatever reason. I can't remember the specifics, but something to the fact where they need a fingerprint of him to stop some device from going off. But he's strapped and they can't get him free to stop it in time. So he's like, all right, cut off my finger. And so they cut off his finger to get the fingerprint. And this actor, any other thing I've ever seen him in, you wouldn't put him as a tough guy. You wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't even think that his character would remotely, do this. You'd think he'd be a sniveling weenie. But the way he carries himself in this, you're like, oh, fuck. You believe that he would fucking let his finger get cut off, and then he would just, you know what I mean, and just fucking eat it and bite it and grin and take it, So, if you have nothing to deal with, nothing to identify with, nothing for us to get behind, how do we put anything behind you? I mean, how do we get with you? How do we become intrigued? You're just a cog in the machine. I was talking to AJ Styles about that. I was like, you need to have. AJ's just phenomenal in the ring, but his promos, while not bad, there's nothing to get behind. There's nothing to identify with. There's nothing to relate to. And I was explaining this to him, and I was like, and I gave him some ideas, and he actually came up with one of his own that's really, really good. And that I think he's going to incorporate. And he was talking about how, I guess his family was dirt poor. And I guess, they were so poor they couldn't afford a TV. I'm like, then that's your point of view. You came from this poverty. Talk about that. Incorporate it into your story. Incorporate that into your promo. Make that a part of your character. Because everybody, can either identify with somebody being really poor, can sympathize with it, or they are poor. And all of a sudden, now we can feel a kinship. It intrigues us. It makes your character more human, makes it more three-dimensional, makes it more realistic, makes it more identifiable with, so that you become a character as opposed to just a phenomenal athlete. Because phenomenal athletes are, it's only so interesting up to so far. You know what I mean? You can only go so far with it. So, that's why, remember Jim McMahon, the quarterback?
Yeah.
He fucking wasn't even that great a quarterback. But he had that whole persona, that whole thing, and the glasses, and the fucking bandana, and the whole thing where you're like, he got all that. Anna Kournikova, she can't play tennis for her ass. You know what I mean? I could probably beat her. Well, I couldn't beat her. I can't play tennis. But I could beat her in ping pong. But the thing is, she's so fucking hot that she's like, wow, fuck, you'd much rather watch her play tennis than all these other people, even though they're better, just because of her looks alone.
How about while you're on that, talking about appearance? Because a lot of indie guys, they're not tan or... Yeah, they're not tan. They have these really... You know what else they have? The cheapest fucking... one thing about the costumes, the outfits, too. They buy their fucking outfits with a really thin, cheap-ass spandex, and it looks cheap. If it looks cheap, it is cheap. And even if it isn't cheap, if it looks cheap, then you look like you spent no money on it. There's guys wearing these outfits, and I'm like... Fuck, that's some pretty fucking crappy ass looking fabric. There's this guy up in who works for Mikey Whipwreck that comes out with like Mikey has his new stuff. Have you seen? No. Really good stuff, like really high quality looking stuff. Much more high quality than fucking most. And I
I'm gonna bring him around and try and get him some more work and to give the boys some better stuff. But just a lot. If you just got really cheap stuff, it just looks cheap. You want to spend some money to make. We talked about that before, but if you're gonna buy fabric, buy the thicker fabric, buy stuff that looks more quality. Unless your character's supposed to be poor. Like Raven was supposed. He's supposed to look like a derelict. That's why he had the ripped up jean shorts and the ripped up T-shirts. That's why I made sure I didn't wear any brand new concert shirts, because Raven wouldn't wear that. What's your question now?
Like, just overall, how your appearance should be in order to have star power. How important appearance is.
Tanning. Some people look better white. Like Brian Knob should never have a tan. Knob should look like a whale. That's what the nasty boys should look nasty. They're fucking scumbags. They should look like it. You know what I mean? They were over like motherfuckers, but they should look the part. That's why Haystacks Calhoun, was always told he had to wear the hillbilly outfit everywhere to look the part. But you should have a decent body, because nobody wants to see a guy with, an unpresentable build, especially these little skinny guys with no muscle tone. I mean, how am I supposed to believe as a fan? Remember, we're suspending disbelief. So we have to believe that you're going to kick somebody's ass. I don't care if you're the baddest shooter in the world. If you don't look the part or carry yourself to the part, I can't believe it as a fan. Now, it doesn't matter that Hoist Gracie at 150 could beat some guy 320. That doesn't mean that we think that every other 150-pounder could beat a 320. No, you have to look like you belong in a ring. You should be tan, at least have some kind, you shouldn't be white as a ghost. You should have a stylish hairdo. That sounds rather gay. But I remember, unless like Shawn Michaels was able to get away with wearing a mullet like 5 years after it went out of style, and Eddie Guerrero gets away with wearing a mullet. But for the most part, if you don't wear something that looks cool, if your character's supposed to be cool, right? And he has a hairstyle that's not in style, or is when he comes to do interviews, if he's in street clothes and they're not very cool. Well, how am I supposed to take you as a cool character if you look like a dork? Like I remember, I'm not even going to name who it is, but there's one guy on TNA who's supposed to be a very cool character, and I like the guy a lot. But his clothing that he wears to the shows was in style 5 years ago, and is so out of style now, and yet he still wears it. And if he wore it, and occasionally, I don't think he ever wears it on interviews, but if he did, it'd be like, you would kill your own gimmick. You know what I mean? If Raven were to do an interview in street clothes, and he were to wear a white blazer, with a green tie, what the fuck? Why the fuck is Raven wearing, it just wouldn't make any sense. It's complete disconnect. It doesn't make any sense for the character. So you have to look the part, and you have to be the part. And the minute you walk through the curtain, to the minute you're back through the curtain, you're the character. And another thing I hate when guys do is, once they get up the ramp, they stop being a character. No, you're not out of character until you're behind the curtain and the curtain closes. The curtain has to close behind you. Otherwise, I've seen guys like, the fucking, I'll give you an example, like Triton, what's his name?
The guy Hogan likes.
Yeah, well, very nice guy, and he's green, and he knows it, and he's learning. Is it here? You suck. And he's learning, and he knows it. But one of the mistakes he made, and this isn't really his fault, because somebody should have told him. They had this big entrance for him. They did some kind of thing with him and Monty, and the lights went out. And when the lights came back on, they caught a shot of him in the ramp. And just walking back, and just wasn't looking like this. He was like this, just kind of walking back, like a normal guy. It's not really his fault. They never should have taken the shot, and if they were going to take a shot, they should have told him. And even if they didn't, like me, I don't get out of character till I know there is no camera on me. And he's not been in the business long enough to know it, but it's just really odd. It was a really strange, because it's an illusion. We're creating an illusion for the fans that we are who we claim to be out there. And if you're supposed to be this badass motherfucker, and then you come back through the curtain, but the camera's still on, you're like, man, I fucking my fingernail. I broke my fingernail. What? It doesn't work. Let's take a break for a second. And we're back! Look at the character Jimmy Fallon does, the radio guy goes, and we're back! And he screams into the microphone on Saturday Night Live. You have to commit to the character. It's a ridiculous DJ who screams into the microphone every time they come back, and it's hilarious, but if you didn't commit to it, it just wouldn't have any resonance. Do you need water? My food here?
No.
And you stink. Bastard. And in many ways, ultimately, and I've avoided this the entire time, but because it's the hardest thing to talk about, but ultimately it's about charisma. And having charisma, the X factor, so hard to define. You know what I mean? You know it when you see it. How do you, and some people say if you don't have it, you can never have it. You can create it. I think on some level, everybody has some kind of potential to be charismatic. You have to tap into that inner part of yourself that, and tapping into it's the hardest thing. For some people it's just easy, you know what I mean? I know it's kind of vague, but it's really hard to describe. I mean, you just know when you know Hogan has charisma. You just know it when you see it. That Ric Flair does. That Austin does. That Rock does. And I mean, a lot of times it's hard to define. So I guess what I'm trying to get across is that you want to do everything in your power to minimize whatever lack of charisma you have, and enhance whatever charisma you do have. So you want to try and bring out as much natural charisma as you have, and you want to do everything else around it so that not only does it magnify what charisma you have, but if you have less than, all these other things fill in the blanks. They fill in the holes. I would talk about promos because promos are so important, but I think that's a whole other lecture. That's for a whole other time. And to get into it now, it wouldn't even do it it would just do it a complete disservice. But
how about any subtle things you can do in a match to?
Yeah, I mean, there's little. You want to have quirks. You want to have my character does a lot of pig snorting, looking around, and thinking, and contemplating what his next move is. I mean, a character like the Spoiler, old school character. He was very methodical. The Sandman didn't care. The Sandman would just take his time and have a cigarette and a beer. Everybody has their own quirks. And I can't give you quirks. I mean, like some guys, like when they punch a guy, they'd sell their hand like they fucked up their knuckle. I mean, really, if you really punch some guy in the head, a lot of times you really fuck up your knuckles. Which is actually why mixed martial arts is actually why bare knuckle fighting is actually safer than boxing gloves. Because with a glove, you don't break your knuckles. So you can punch a guy like 8,000 times, whereas, you punch a guy, enough times in the head, you're going to break your knuckles. Nice. That's a whole other lecture for John McCain. But I mean, everybody has their own little stuff that they do, and if you don't, then you need to think of stuff to do. And what fits your character. It's very hard to come up with. I mean, if this was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's very easy. I mean, that's why the WWF at some point was coming up with, okay, we'll have a hockey player, the Goon. We'll have a toilet guy, T.O. Hopper. We'll have, we'll have a dentist, Isaac Yankem. I mean, because if everybody could, because what they didn't understand was they were creating gimmicks. What gets over is personalities. Terry Funk's a personality. Ric Flair's a personality. Hulk Hogan's a personality. A larger-than-life personality. A star personality. You want to be a star character. So it's looks, it's charisma, it's appearance. I mean, looks and appearance are pretty similar, I guess. It's how you carry yourself. It's how you walk to the ring. It's how you perform in the ring. I mean, I'll give you another great example. When I was Scotty Flamingo and Johnny Polo and not Johnny Polo, but Scotty Flamingo and Scotty the Body, I was considered a pretty good hand. I was considered a pretty good worker, and I was always the guy that had to put over the guy who was going to get the push to. I was always right. When I was in Portland and every place else, Portland I was on top, and but whenever they bring somebody new in, I'd have to get him over because the guy couldn't work. So they go, well, you can work. You work with him. When I got to WCW with Scotty Flamingo, well, you can work. Get him over. And then I watch guys like, I watch enough guys that were good workers, and I didn't want to fall in that category, and I figured I already have enough charisma. But at that point, back then, there were so many stars that the breaking out of the pack was a whole other matter. And I was also young, and I was like, well, I don't want to be a guy stuck in the pack because I'm a good worker, and I just have to put people over because I can make them look better. So I wanted to create something that was personal, which was Raven, but also something, I made the character more barbaric. I didn't make him, because I could have made Raven a good worker too. I mean, I could have made him a good technical worker, and change holds, and, because you could still be a disaffected slacker and a martyr for society's dysfunction and still be a great athlete, still a great wrestler. I mean, the character could have, let's say, excelled in high school wrestling, but didn't fit in. I mean, it doesn't necessarily not fit. I made the character more barbaric because A, that's what the business thrives on is badasses. B, because that's the kind of character where you're like, you don't say, hey, listen, I need you to get so-and-so over, because it's not the kind of work that's going to elevate a guy. You know what I mean? I mean, not that it won't elevate a guy, but it's not the kind of guy. I got to say this in the proper terminology. It's not that Raven won't elevate you, but if you want a guy to get a technical match to get over the guy who's being groomed or something, that's not where you're going to look, because Raven's going to, use pots and pans. He's going to be much more barbaric, much more vicious. It's a different style. It's a style, and it's not that it's a style clash, or AJ's finisher. It's not that it's a style clash, but it's not where you go when you need that done. And I intentionally created the character to be more barbaric, more vicious, more brooding, more lonerish, because partly that's what I felt inside, and partly that's what I felt would be interesting to watch, but also because physically in the ring, I thought there was a better chance of me becoming a main eventer than being the guy that's always, like, I'll give you the best example, Arn Anderson. Arn Anderson was every bit the worker Flair was, every bit the promo Flair was, but he didn't have that same charisma, that same over the top, although in many ways his was a much more subtle charisma, and which doesn't mean he couldn't have been world champion, because he had the potential skills to be world champion, but because he was always the guy used to get the next guy over to face Flair, that's where he was stuck. And in fact, me and Arn had a huge fight about it, and then eventually he admitted I was right, but we still don't get along, so it doesn't really make a difference anyway. He said it was the way I said it, which may have been entirely possible, because I'm not known for my tact. But my point being is that I was going to be world champion. Whether I was going to make it there or not is a whole other matter. But I wanted to be world champion. I didn't want to limit my options. And I knew if I stayed as a good worker type character, that I was going to be used to get over these bad worker type characters who were going to be groomed for title runs. And I could probably assure myself that the highest I could ever get is right below the top. And that would be, and more realistically, a lot lower than that. And I didn't want to be there. I wanted to have more than that. And I really respected the fuck out of Arn. I mean, we can't stand each other personally now, but that doesn't mean that I don't respect the fuck out of him as a worker. He's a hell of a worker and a phenomenal fucking promo man. But he was never going to be higher than that, because every booker saw him as, man, what a hell of a worker. Let's use him to get over so-and-so. And so I made sure I created a more barbaric, more vicious character so that I wasn't used in that position, that I was the guy that they were using a guy like him to get over. It worked for in ECW and WCW. I got X amount of far. In WWE, I went, and in TNA, I went back up here. So I would say my plan worked pretty fucking well. And it's also, right place, right time. I mean, personality clash. There's so many other factors that are involved in this. If I wouldn't have been so detrimental to my own career, which is a whole other matter. I mean, there's so many other issues at stake. But what I tried to do was, aside from my personality behind the scenes, I tried to make sure that I covered every fucking base I could in the charisma, star power, work, in all those departments, so that if I was judged strictly by my skills and not by who and what I am behind the scenes, that I would have a shot of being world champion. Personal politics always come into play, and it probably wasn't even until a couple months ago that I was actually even willing to take any responsibility for the fact that I may not have achieved what I wanted due to my own, stupidity behind the scenes. But that's a whole other matter. But I didn't want to leave anything to chance inside the ring, and so I covered every fucking base. I made sure I could work. I made sure I could walk and talk, which is known as Shakespeare. I made sure I could be a heel. I made sure I could be a babyface, and I made sure that I was a star. I made sure that when people saw me, they saw a star. They saw star power. I made sure I tried to make sure I covered it in every conceivable way, so that I would have every opportunity of making it as far as I possibly could and making as much as I possibly could. And ultimately, it never became about money for me. It was more about the art, which is why I walked out on enough places, because I wasn't happy as an artist. Because I think deep down we're all sensitive artists. I mean, this is an art form, plain and simple. And I would like to say that I probably said it before anybody did. I was the first person to actually go on record as saying that this is an art. It's an art form. I mean, at least as far as I know I was. And I believe that. I mean, look at the ballet. I defy the ballet to not rehearse like we do, because we don't rehearse. I defy the ballet to go in the back and call a bunch of high spots, for the Nutcracker Suite. I'm going to do a pirouette, and you jump on my back, and we'll do this, and then you spin on your toes, and whatever. You couldn't. What we do is a fucking art form, And I think what happens is, guys forget it's an art form, and they just think it's an athletic, it's just a semi-fake, or whatever, it's a realistic, but yet predetermined outcome athletic contest. It's an art form, which means you have to be an artist, which means you're painting a canvas, which means, it's kind of like, I've used this analogy before, okay, if you take a piece of art, right, and you take a pretty cool piece of art and you don't put a good frame on it, it's not going to stand out. You're like, well, that's cool. You put a frame on it, and all of a sudden, wow, that's something interesting. It adds to it. I mean, you need the frame. And, good, my food's here. Good, we're finishing up, aren't we? Anyway, so if you're just a good worker, a good technical worker, you're just throwing a bunch of paint on the canvas. You got nothing to hang it on. You have nothing to hang the canvas on. That's why you do everything else, the promos, the ring presence, the attire, the character. That becomes the frame that highlights the picture. And in many cases, the frame's much more valuable than the picture, especially in our business. I mean, at home, I got a Led Zeppelin poster. It's one of those giant, the 5 foot by 3 foot ones, with the old guy holding the lantern, and it has some of the lyrics down in the corner. It's black, and the lantern guy's like yellowish, greenish, or whatever. And probably a $15 poster. I bought like a $300-400 frame for it. Stuck it up there. It's a piece of art now. You know what I mean? I got a Superfly poster. Same giant size, probably $10-15. I paid another $300-400 for the frame, and it's a fucking piece of art now. You wouldn't look at it and go, it's just a Superfly poster. It looks like a fucking piece of art. Many times the frame is much more important than the actual artwork inside. Best example, like I said before, is the Junkyard Dog fucking 20 years ago. There wasn't a whole lot of work rate in there. But man, he drew fucking money because he was a larger-than-life superhero character. Huge. Big star. The work rate is so infinite, technical work rate is so infinitesimally smaller in value than almost all these other things combined. The actual working, which is, unfortunately for a whole other time, the working is what you do between the moves. Anybody can do the moves. There's only so many moves out there, and everybody can do most of them, except for maybe the really acrobatic stuff. It's what you do between them. That's the work, I don't care what the sheets say. I don't care what the internet says. That technical work is one thing. Appealing to a crowd, appealing to a larger audience, you got to be a star. You got to be a character to really draw the larger audience in, because you're appealing to a mass of people. Who would you rather watch? Would you rather see Superman or just some guy, or just Clark Kent with a cape? No, you'd rather see Superman. Would you rather see, it's the difference between Michael Keaton's Batman and George Clooney's. George Clooney was a farcical Batman. He wasn't a star. He didn't look like Batman. Didn't carry himself like Batman. He wasn't believable as Batman. Whereas Michael Keaton, even though nobody thought he would be, ended up being, or Val Kilmer was. But George Clooney, you couldn't buy him in that position.
Can you mention moves? Can moves give you star power at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a people's elbow or something?
Yeah, moves can give you star power. They can be additional to it. That's all part of having your own move set. You should have 4 moves, at least 4 moves, and probably when you're starting, I see so many guys learning 30, 40, 50 moves, but they've perfected none of them. They do all different moves every single match, so the fans can't grasp it. The fans like catchphrases, they like repetition, they like seeing the same moves. There's a reason why their catchphrases are over, because and when you're doing a move like the people's elbow, that's like a catchphrase in the ring. It's a physical catchphrase. And there's a reason people do them, because people want to see that. They like to be reminded of the same things. They like seeing that. They like to identify with it. And all these guys learn all these moves, don't perfect any of them, or perfect a bunch of them, but don't use them all the time. And so there's nothing for the fan to identify with. You should use 4 moves until you get them over. You should perfect 4 moves. You do them every single match, and you never let anybody reverse them or kick out of them or move from them until you get them over. And once that happens, once they're over, like I've got a couple moves that, like when I throw the guy face first in the buckle, he staggers back, I hit the ropes, close on him. If I don't do it for 6 months, if I shoot the guy and he goes in face first and I hit the ropes, they know what's coming. They've seen it so many fucking times. The drop hold in the chair. I could go a year without doing it, but as soon as I put the chair in the center and shoot the guy off, they know what's coming. So once you breed the familiarity to it, then you can use it to reverse it, to change it up, to do all that. But nowadays, guys like will get a move, start to try and get a move over. After 3 weeks, they have the guy reverse it. Well, it's not even established yet. It's like catchphrases. It's you have to establish things. And then there's that other thing that goes, well, if I keep using the same moves, they're not going to get boring. Well, no, because I have 4 moves and you have 4 moves, so that match is going to look different because my 4 moves blend with your 4, and then my 4 moves with Rich's 4 moves are going to blend differently, and my 4 with his 4 so it's always going to come off differently. And besides, 4 moves in a 10-minute match or a 6-minute match. What's that, like 30 seconds, a minute?
Yeah.
There's so much more in the match to do, but now you're establishing things so that people can bond with you, and that is part of becoming a star, is having moves that people can identify with. And that is a very good point. That'll help you become a bigger star, because now you have a move set that people can respond to it and they can remember. And that's why catchphrases are so important, because people can, it's like I know a catchphrase is over when I hear Disco saying it in the locker room. That's the first key, because if people are doing it at home, then the shit's over. People want to identify with something. They want familiarity. I'm exhausted.
All right, is there anything in conclusion? We'll see you next time on the next edition of Secrets of the Ring with Raven. Thank you very much.